Hey guys, welcome to my very first RWBY theory on this channel. I've been reviewing RWBY for a while now, and I do have plans to go back and do reviews of the previous seasons from before I started doing episode-by-episode reviews. It's a show that I think has some problems, definitely, but I still really enjoy it, and I'm having a lot of fun sharing my enjoyment of the show with you guys. RWBY is a show where the rules of its universe aren't very well defined. We know the bare bones about how things work, but the powers and abilities of the characters can take any form that the writers want, so it's hard to predict things that are going to happen later on. So while I have a lot of thoughts about the show, it's rare for me to form a complete theory. I say that though, and then I had to go back and re-record some of the audio for this theory to include new details from this past weekend's episode that contributed to the themes of this video and sparked yet another RWBY theory in me. So you can expect another RWBY theory within a couple weeks of me coming back from my winter break. Anyway, putting all that aside, this theory is going to be focusing on the idea that it is not RWBY herself or any member of Team RWBY who is the hero of the show, but prominent recurring side character Jean Arc. In fiction, we typically think of the hero as the main character, but that's not necessarily true. The main character of a story is called the protagonist. They're the character that we follow. They're the character whose viewpoint we typically see things through. There can be multiple protagonists, of course, but most stories tend to stick to one, especially stories told in a visual medium. Take Steven Universe, for example. In Steven Universe, Steven is the protagonist and the viewpoint character. Everything that we see is filtered through his perception. Most shows play a little bit more fast and loose with things than that, but in the case of RWBY, we typically see things through the point of view of RWBY or one of her teammates, or from individual characters who are the focus of their particular episode. Even the scene amongst the villains of the show in the first episode of Volume 4 was shown to us from the perspective of longtime series villain Cinder. I bring all of this up because Jean has not once been the viewpoint character for more than a few episodes at a time, and his characterization has constantly taken a backseat to Team RWBY's, and specifically RWBY's herself. And even in episodes where we do see things through his viewpoint, we also see things through the viewpoints of others. And yet I still think that he is the hero of this story, not the protagonist, just the hero. The hero is the one who journeys, the one who changes the most, the one who steps up at the end and overcomes ordeals to change the world for the better, or to at least change his own world for the better. This process is called the hero's journey. It can be an actual journey, or it can be a spiritual journey, or it can be a metaphorical journey, but most stories of heroes have a hero's journey in some shape or form as part of their narrative. I actually went online and found a breakdown of the hero's journey so that I could go through it and try to match the stages with each of the characters. I'm going to be mostly focusing on RWBY and Jean here, since RWBY is by far the character after Jean who comes closest. Here's the best breakdown that I found on a site called thewritersjourney.com. Now keep in mind that a hero's journey doesn't have to hit every single one of these beats. This isn't some definitive guideline, it's just a breakdown of what the typical hero's journey entails. And in fact, a lot of writers really try to mix this up nowadays. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take us through each of these step by step and first relate them to RWBY, keeping in mind that neither of their journeys are complete yet, so at some point going down this list we're gonna stop seeing story beats that actually relate to the characters' actions because they haven't done them yet. Stage 1 is the ordinary world, and it doesn't have to literally be a different world than the one that the hero spends the most of the rest of their time in, just a place, real or metaphorical, that is within their typical comfort zone. Take the Shire from Tolkien's The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, for example. In both The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, we have a protagonist who lives in a peaceful, charming little village that nobody ever really leaves, and the story itself doesn't actually start until they do. Until they leave that place, that ordinary place that is ordinary to them, and venture out into an unknown world. RWBY's world is not ordinary. Monsters roam everywhere, and it's all that most people can do to stay alive. But we do see towards the beginning of the story RWBY receive an invitation to Beacon Academy, a school for young people training to be hunters and huntresses, the people who fight those monsters. Her ordinary world is the place she was in before she went to Beacon, and likewise the second story beat in the hero's journey, the call to adventure, is her invitation to Beacon. Which brings us to our third story beat, Refusal of the Call, where the hero fears the unknown and tries to turn away from adventure. RWBY never really does that, but that's not really an issue. Like I said, it doesn't have to hit all of these beats. RWBY has wanted to be a huntress her entire life. She's not going to refuse the chance to train at one of the best schools for huntresses in the entire world. When she meets her mentor, the enigmatic Professor Ozpin, and accepts his invitation to be trained, she crosses the threshold, leaving her ordinary world and entering a new one, that being Beacon Academy itself. herself. Here she is tested, she makes allies and enemies. This is all the plot stuff that happens on an episode-to-episode basis. And the approach is when she and her friends decide to take an active part in bringing down the groups of people that they see threatening their world. Again, this is more plot stuff that happens from episode to episode, once RWBY and her allies realize that something bigger is going on. And the 8th story beat, The Ordeal, just happened at the end of Volume 3. The villainous groups working behind the scenes in this world made their play, and RWBY and her friends weren't ready for it. People died, and Volume 4 so far has been about the characters coming to terms with that. And while it's a bit of a stretch, you could argue that the new life that comes from a moment of death mentioned here, and the reward at this 9th story beat, where the hero takes possession of a treasure won by facing death, comes in the form of the realization of RWBY's powers as a silver-eyed person, powers that aren't yet defined within the series, and that the journey that she is undertaking now could be the road back. But that's about where the story ends, so we can't really look further than that. And I'm not going to lie, I had to stretch quite a bit to make RWBY's story fit within this outline. For example, I treat Ozpin as the mentor in this scenario, but he never really directly mentors RWBY, who was taught how to fight by her Uncle Crow, who isn't really a part of the story much. But that's not a bad thing. The typical hero's journey isn't always the best hero's journey that you can write. And RWBY is definitely a hero. She is a heroic character who is going on her own journey. But like I said, her story doesn't fit as well as Jean's. That's just a simple fact. Let's go back through each of these story points and look at how they relate to Jean instead of to RWBY. If RWBY is our viewpoint character, especially during the first season, then Jean was absolutely introduced to us in a sympathetic way, and he is definitely made to be someone who the audience can identify with. In this world where hunters and huntresses have extraordinary powers that are beyond comprehension, Jean is the everyman. He came to Beacon with virtually no experience, and a lot of what he sees there is entirely new to him, unlike characters like RWBY. And he absolutely has a polarity in his life pulling him in different directions, causing him stress. Jean got into Beacon with false credentials, because he wants to live up to the legacy of his family. The sword that he carries is a family heirloom, and yet Jean has no powers as a hunter. He has no training as a hunter. He has no idea what he's doing, and he constantly struggles with whether or not he should stay at Beacon and continue to fake his way through and try to learn, or if he should just go home. This is simultaneously his call to adventure and his refusal of the call. We see him struggling with these things consistently over the few episodes that he gets during Volume 1. Then he meets his mentor. He already knew her technically, she's a member of his team, Pyrrha Nikos. But when Jean admits to her the truth, and she offers to train him, to help him to improve, to help him on his journey to becoming a hunter and living up to the legacy of his family, that is the moment when she becomes his mentor, and his entire life changes. He crosses the threshold and commits to leaving the ordinary world, that being the place that he was in on a personal level, that place where he doesn't have any powers, where he doesn't have any training, and he enters fully a new world of hunters and huntresses. And like RWBY, his tests come in the form of the day-to-day plot-related elements of each episode. It's just where RWBY is already capable, Jean is still learning. Everything is a literal test to him. His approach is when the villains first make their big play at the end of Volume 3, and this carries directly into his ordeal. He has to face life and death, but again, unlike RWBY, he's not a capable fighter yet. He is far less ready for this than she was. And I would argue that he is still facing his ordeal as we go into Volume 4. Because, and I apologize because this is a huge spoiler if you haven't seen the show, he loses his mentor. Like Luke Skywalker in Star Wars, for example, when he lost Obi-Wan Kenobi, when Obi-Wan Kenobi was killed in front of his eyes. Jean loses Pyrrha. She dies. And there was absolutely nothing that he could have done about it. Now he is left still confronting her death every day, and yet he still fights to become stronger. He still fights to follow her example. The fight's just a little more internal now. Not only do these things fit so much better for him as a character, it's also, let's face it, a bit more inspirational a story. Not only that, but Jean's story coincides with a hero's inner journey. Limited awareness of a problem. Jean coming to Beacon without knowing how difficult things were going to be there. Increased awareness of a need for change and the fear and resistance to change coincide perfectly with his call to adventure and his refusal of the call. Overcoming fear came in the form of him putting his pride aside and agreeing to let Pyrrha train him. Committing to change, experimenting with new conditions, preparing for major change. All of these are things that are all covered as part of his training, tests, and ordeals, and his big change came when Pyrrha died, and his acceptance of consequences is happening right now in Volume 4, as he slowly comes to terms with Pyrrha's death. All that's left now is the reward for his ordeal, his recommitment to completing the adventure, his major test at the climax of the story, and his victory. Again, I reiterate that RWBY is a hero of this story, but Jean Arc is the hero. There is more to this character than what we know, and he will be more important than we know to resolving the events set up by this series, which is actually supported by the fact that in the most recent episode, Tyrion, one of the villains, and another part of the same inner circle that Cinder herself is a part of, is very clearly interested in him, hinting even further to Jean's legacy and his family's legacy. There is still some big reveal about this character that we haven't gotten yet. I cannot wait to see where the story takes Jean from here. He's been a bit of an underdeveloped character up to this point, but if I'm right, that's entirely by choice of the writers, so that they could save the big reveal that he is the true hero of the story for later in the timeline. Overall, I'm really happy with this theory, but as usual, I want to ask you guys, what do you think of it? Let's get a discussion going in the comment section down below. Either way, this has been AJ22, and I will talk to you guys later. Hey guys, just re-recording my outro real quick in the wake of me having to delay this video. Thanks again for being so understanding of that. I saw you guys' comments on my announcement video that I made yesterday, and you guys really are the best audience on all of YouTube. That said, I hope you enjoyed this, my first RWBY theory, even if you aren't a fan of RWBY itself. I kind of turned the video into a study of the hero's journey so that it can be enjoyed on that merit as well. If you did like the video, please like it and subscribe, and of course share it with anyone you know who might also enjoy it, especially RWBY fans. I'd like to draw a few more of them to my channel. And as per usual guys, thank you for watching.